Chapter 1. Change can be easy and fun. There is an undeniable power in starting small, especially when the goal is to transform your life. For decades, the desire to improve, whether it means eating healthier, losing weight, finding peace of mind, sleeping soundly, or simply becoming a more present parent, has driven human ambition. Yet there remains a staggering gap between the lives we wish to lead and the actions we take. The media constantly reports on epidemics of stress, obesity, and exhaustion, painting a bleak picture of our modern existence. Society is quick to assign blame, often pointing the finger directly at the individual. The pervasive cultural narrative suggests that if you fail to exercise or eat well, it is a personal shortcoming. You are made to feel ashamed. But the truth is far more forgiving. The inability to change is not your fault. Cultivating positive habits is not nearly as difficult as conventional wisdom suggests. For generations, well-intentioned but fundamentally unscientific advice has set people up for disappointment. When previous attempts at self-improvement fall short, it is easy to assume that change is inherently arduous or that there is a profound lack of personal motivation. Both assumptions are entirely false. The flaw lies not within the individual, but within the methodology. Imagine trying to assemble a complex piece of furniture using incorrect instructions and missing hardware. The resulting frustration would hardly be your own fault. You would naturally blame the manufacturer. Yet when it comes to personal development, we rarely question the system. We instinctively blame ourselves. When aspirations are not met, the inner critic takes over. The prevailing belief is that failure to be productive or healthy is a sign of a flawed character. The logic dictates that success requires nothing more than pulling oneself together, mustering more discipline, and adhering strictly to a rigid program. This perspective is fundamentally incorrect. The individual is not the obstacle. The approach to change is the obstacle. It is a matter of flawed design, not flawed character. Creating lasting, positive habits becomes effortless when approached with a system grounded in actual human psychology. This requires tools that eliminate guesswork and methods that streamline the process of change. The popular discourse surrounding habit formation often encourages unrealistic expectations, leaving people trapped in a cycle of aspiration and subsequent failure. To truly redesign your behavior, 3 mental shifts are necessary. First, self-judgment must cease. Second, grand aspirations must be deconstructed into minuscule, manageable actions. Third, mistakes must be embraced as valuable discoveries rather than failures. This mindset may feel counterintuitive. Self-criticism is a deeply ingrained habit for many, acting like a sled sliding down a well-worn path in the snow. However, adopting a new framework for change allows you to forge a different path. Soon, the old grooves of self-doubt are covered over, and the new route becomes the default. This transformation occurs rapidly because the most effective way to change is by feeling good, not by feeling bad. This process does not demand Herculean willpower, strict accountability measures, or a magical timeline of days to form a habit. Those traditional methods contradict the realities of human psychology and inevitably breed frustration. This new paradigm offers a joyful, seamless bridge between your current reality and your ideal self. It is a systematic framework designed to replace change-related anxiety with a profound sense of discovery. This is not mere speculation. It is a rigorously tested process refined through the experiences of tens of thousands of individuals. By exchanging rigid prescriptions for proven psychological principles, anyone can architect breakthrough changes in their own lives. When judgment is removed, behavior becomes an engaging science experiment, and exploration becomes the prerequisite for lasting success. Behavior design. This comprehensive system for understanding and modifying human action is known as behavior design. Initially, these principles were utilized to help innovators build products that millions rely on daily for fitness, financial management, and efficiency. Recognizing the immense power of these methods in the business world, the focus inevitably shifted toward personal transformation. The question became, how can individuals seamlessly redesign their own lives? The journey began, as it often does for scientists, with rigorous self-experimentation. It involved tinkering with desired behaviors, implementing seemingly silly routines like doing 2 push-ups after every trip to the bathroom, and observing the outcomes. Rational ideas, such as eating an orange at lunch every day, completely failed, yet every failure served as data. By analyzing what worked and what did not, patterns emerged. The process was highly deliberate. Through continuous iteration, what started as a weakness evolved into a profound strength. Within 6 months, significant life changes materialized. Profound weight loss, heightened productivity, and a complete overhaul of daily nutrition and sleep environments. The accumulation of dozens of microscopic habits culminated in a massive transformation. Crucially, sustaining this new reality did not feel burdensome. It felt entirely natural and surprisingly enjoyable. The excitement generated by these personal results led to teaching the method to others, proving that the approach was universally applicable. What began as a whimsical personal exploration within the realm of behavior design evolved into the Tiny Habits method, a rapid, accessible vehicle for profound personal growth. It is crucial to recognize a pervasive misconception. Information alone does not reliably alter behavior. This information-action fallacy plagues well-meaning professionals and programs alike. The false assumption is that providing people with facts will shift their attitudes and, consequently, their actions. Reflecting on your own life reveals that simple information rarely triggers lasting transformation, and this is perfectly normal. Research dictates that true, lasting change stems from only 3 sources: a profound epiphany, a shift in environment, or the implementation of tiny behavioral changes. Since orchestrating a genuine epiphany is nearly impossible without magical powers, the focus must remain on environmental design and baby steps. Starting small is the gateway to monumental shifts. Once the mechanics of tiny habits are understood, they pave the way for tackling major life changes, dismantling destructive routines, and achieving monumental goals. The core philosophy is straightforward. Identify a desired behavior, shrink it to a microscopic size, seamlessly integrate it into your existing daily routine, and allow it to naturally flourish. Tiny is fast. Modern life is defined by a pervasive scarcity of time. People eat meals in transit and take conference calls during family vacations, constantly pressured by the ticking clock. This scarcity mindset forces us to reject positive changes simply because we cannot fathom finding the hours to commit to them. The prospect of dedicating 30 minutes to daily exercise or preparing elaborate healthy meals feels utterly impossible. The alternative to forcefully scolding yourself into change is to make the process radically easy. You begin with an action that takes less than 30 seconds. This minuscule commitment quickly wires the new habit into your brain, allowing it to grow organically without the pressure of time constraints. Starting with 1 to 3 microscopic behaviors is particularly vital for those experiencing high stress and severe time deficits. Attempting massive shifts under such conditions inevitably leads to failure. For many, starting tiny is not merely the best option, it is the only viable path forward. Tiny can start now. Embracing the microscopic allows you to confront your reality exactly as it is, without delay. It meets you in your current circumstances, whether your life is chaotic or merely stressful. Everyone battles psychological quirks and less than ideal environments. Rather than succumbing to shame, this methodology hacks the psychological system. While the system is designed to accommodate any habit you choose, there is one universal recommendation to begin with: a practice implemented the moment you wake up. It requires roughly 3 seconds and is known as the Maui habit. The moment your feet touch the floor in the morning, immediately say the phrase, "It's going to be a great day." As you speak these 7 words, intentionally cultivate a feeling of optimism. The sequence is simple. After putting your feet on the floor, you declare that it will be a great day, and to solidify the habit, you immediately try to feel positive. This simple practice has reliably produced excellent results for thousands of individuals. Variations exist, of course. Some prefer to say, "Today is going to be awesome," while others might wait until they look in the bathroom mirror. The exact wording and timing can be adjusted to fit individual preferences, but the core mechanism remains. Even on mornings when exhaustion or anxiety dominate, the phrase should still be spoken, perhaps modified to, "It's going to be a great day somehow." This simple declaration, even when uttered with skepticism, slightly opens the door to a positive reality. The Maui habit serves as a perfect introduction to the ease of starting small and introduces the most critical skill in behavior change: the ability to deliberately feel successful. Tiny is safe. Consider a toddler learning to navigate the world on 2 feet. A child might stumble and fall repeatedly on a hard driveway, yet they continue to rise without severe injury because they are small. For a tall adult, a similar fall would result in significant pain. This physical reality mirrors the emotional risk of habit formation. Attempting a massive new undertaking, like flying to India for a week-long yoga retreat without ever having stepped on a mat, carries incredibly high stakes regarding time, money, and expectation. The primitive lizard brain inherently recognizes this danger, making large leaps feel paralyzing. If a gentle wave is challenging, attempting to surf a massive swell guarantees failure and a loss of confidence. Tiny habits eradicate this emotional and practical risk. They operate undercover, without drawing attention or inviting sabotage. The flexibility and microscopic nature of the behaviors eliminate the fear of real failure. A minor stumble is simply a data point in the ongoing process of creation, not a devastating defeat. Tiny can grow big. Sustainable, massive growth consistently originates from humble beginnings. Consider the story of a mother attempting to launch an educational media company. The sheer volume of necessary tasks, from navigating tax codes to securing office space, paralyzed her. She procrastinated the essential daunting tasks, repeatedly promising herself she would tackle them later. She was a victim of the pervasive cultural myth that one must go big or go home. This societal demand for instant gratification makes incremental progress feel inadequate, leading to demoralization when results do not materialize overnight. Upon discovering the power of the microscopic approach, she abandoned the go big mentality. Her new strategy was incredibly simple. After dropping her child at school, she would pull her car over and write down one single actionable task on a sticky note. It had to be something she could accomplish immediately, such as sending a single email or drafting a short introduction. This tiny act of focus triggered a chain reaction that propelled her productivity for the entire day, ultimately resulting in the successful launch of her business. One tiny bite of a massive project may seem insignificant initially, but it generates the precise momentum required to conquer larger challenges. Before you know it, the seemingly insurmountable task has been fully accomplished. Tiny doesn't rely on motivation or willpower. The cultural conversation surrounding behavior change is saturated with misleading emphasis on motivation and willpower. Even esteemed academic theories frequently fail when applied to the messy reality of daily life. Motivation and willpower are inherently shape-shifting and utterly unreliable. Consider the case of a highly successful radio host struggling with a severe sugar addiction. Despite the tragic loss of multiple family members to diabetes and her own intense desire to change, her motivation would inevitably seesaw. She would attempt to quit cold turkey, rely entirely on her formidable willpower, and inevitably fail, leading to intense guilt and further weight gain. She believed her failure was a character flaw, a lack of inner strength. However, her struggle was not a moral failing, it was a design issue. Once she realized that simplicity, not willpower, is the true catalyst for change, her approach shifted. She replaced the unyielding demand for total abstinence with a constellation of tiny, impactful habits. She redesigned her environment, replacing sugary snacks with healthier alternatives she actually enjoyed. She implemented small exercise routines that naturally diminished her sugar cravings. Most importantly, she cultivated habits to process the underlying grief that often triggered her binges. When sadness arose, she used it as a prompt to journal or reach out to a friend rather than consume sugar. By keeping the actions tiny and her expectations manageable, she circumvented the need for the fair-weather friends of motivation and willpower. Tiny is transformative. The process relies heavily on celebrating successes, regardless of how small they seem. This intentional celebration hacks our neurochemistry, rapidly converting deliberate actions into automatic routines. It teaches you how to authentically feel good, replacing deeply rooted habits of self-flagellation with genuine self-compassion. Consider a woman who faced a devastating convergence of tragedies: the death of a child, another child's severe mental illness diagnosis, her husband's early onset Alzheimer's, and the impending bankruptcy of their family business. In the midst of this unimaginable grief and depression, she struggled simply to get out of bed. For her, tiny was not just an option, it was a lifeline. She began with the Maui habit. Every morning she put her feet on the floor and spoke those 7 words, "It's going to be a great day." This singular microscopic anchor provided a crucial fulcrum. It initiated a cascade of other small successes that helped her regain productivity and maintain her strength for her family. These tiny seeds of positivity, planted in the deepest cracks of her shattered life, grew steadily. Even as new challenges arose, she possessed undeniable evidence of her own resilience and success. Years later, having navigated her family through the crisis, she still relies on that same tiny, transformative morning ritual. The anatomy of tiny habits. The structure of a tiny habit consists of 3 essential components. First is the anchor moment. This is an existing routine or a specific event, like brushing your teeth or hearing a phone ring, that serves as the reliable reminder to perform the new action. Second is the new tiny behavior. This is a drastically simplified version of the desired habit, such as flossing a single tooth or completing 2 push-ups. This action is executed immediately following the anchor moment. Third is the instant celebration. This is an action performed immediately after the tiny behavior to deliberately generate positive emotion and a feeling of success. It might be a physical gesture, or simply telling yourself, "I did a good job." This celebration is the crucial mechanism that wires the habit into the brain. Tiny starts with a key. The extreme application of baby steps did not emerge from thin air. It was the result of decoding the fundamental mechanics of human behavior. After a decade of research, the underlying formula became clear. It is a solution that, once revealed, appears incredibly obvious, capable of decoding every single action we take. Whether it is unloading the dishwasher, mindlessly scrolling social media at 3 in the morning, making the bed, or eating chocolate, every behavior, both positive and negative, is constructed from the exact same core components. Understanding the relationship between these ingredients is the key to mastering human action. The models and methods of behavior design are structured to provide absolute clarity on this framework, allowing anyone to confidently tackle any behavioral challenge without feeling stuck. The journey begins with the foundational key, the Fogg behavior model. Tiny exercises to start practicing tiny habits. The optimal way to comprehend this methodology is through immediate application. Do not strive for perfection. Adopt the mindset of an enthusiastic explorer who learns through action, remains flexible, and enjoys the process. Exercise 1. The flossing habit. While flossing all your teeth is a known concept, it rarely becomes an automatic routine. This exercise focuses entirely on cultivating automaticity, not the volume of the action. Step 1. Discover a type of floss that you genuinely find comfortable to use. Step 2. Place the floss container directly next to your toothbrush on the bathroom counter. Step 3. Immediately after setting down your toothbrush, pick up the floss and tear off a piece. Step 4. Floss exactly 1 tooth. Step 5. Look in the mirror, smile, and deliberately feel a sense of accomplishment for establishing a new routine. Flossing more than 1 tooth is acceptable, but it must be viewed strictly as extra credit, not the baseline requirement. Exercise 2. Daily chocolate. Incorporating small amounts of healthy dark chocolate can be beneficial. This exercise wires it in as a daily routine. Step 1. Acquire high-quality dark chocolate. Step 2. Identify an anchor moment in your morning, such as finishing your vitamins or brewing coffee, and immediately eat a small piece of the chocolate. Step 3. Consciously savor the flavor and generate a feeling of happiness for adding a healthy element to your day. This is a habit meant to remain tiny, never to be expanded. Exercise 3. Remind yourself that you change best by feeling good. This is the most critical concept to internalize. Step 1. On a small piece of paper, write the phrase, "I change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad." Step 2. Affix this note to a frequently viewed location, such as your bathroom mirror. Step 3. Read the statement regularly. Step 4. Observe how this profound insight begins to operate within your own life and affects your interactions with others. Chapter 2. The elements of behavior. You have the power to alter your life by altering your actions. What might be surprising is that every action is driven by only 3 specific variables. The key to decoding this reality is a framework known as the Fogg behavior model. It outlines the 3 universal components of human action and how they interact to dictate everything from brushing a single tooth to completing a marathon. Grasping this model allows you to analyze the root causes of your actions, freeing you from the destructive habit of attributing failure to a lack of character or discipline. Furthermore, it empowers you to architect positive behavioral shifts for yourself and those around you. When we look at the formula B equals MAPE, we see that behavior happens when motivation, ability, and a prompt converge at the exact same moment. Motivation represents your underlying desire to perform the action. Ability reflects your practical capacity to execute it. The prompt is the specific cue that triggers the action. Consider an example from 2010. During a strenuous workout on an elliptical machine with a heart rate pounding at over 120 beats per minute, I engaged in an unusual activity for someone mid-exercise. I made a financial donation to the Red Cross. This isolated action can be perfectly deconstructed using the model. The behavior was donating money via text message to aid victims of the devastating earthquake in Haiti. The motivation was my intense desire to assist those suffering from a highly publicized disaster. The ability was incredibly high because replying to a text message requires minimal effort. Finally, the prompt was the text message itself arriving on my device. All 3 elements converged simultaneously, resulting in the completed behavior. If any single component had been missing or insufficient, the donation likely would not have occurred. Had the Red Cross requested a phone call and a credit card number while I was exercising with my wallet left in the car, the ability factor would have plummeted, rendering the action too difficult. Alternatively, if they had relied on direct mail that I discarded as junk, the prompt would have been absent. By making the action effortless for someone who was already motivated, the Red Cross perfectly aligned motivation, ability, and a prompt, resulting in a wildly successful fundraising campaign. It is crucial to understand that BMAP applies to all human behavior. When initially introduced to this concept, people frequently express skepticism. It seems implausible that a single, simple model could accurately account for every conceivable action across every culture. A common assumption is that positive actions and negative actions must operate under fundamentally different psychological mechanisms. The struggle to maintain a rigorous fitness routine feels worlds apart from the effortless descent into hours of online shopping. People intuitively feel that difficult, beneficial changes involve a complexity absent from simple, detrimental habits. This intuition is incorrect. Human behaviors are comparable to bicycles. While they may vary wildly in appearance and function, from a unicycle to a high-performance road bike, the fundamental mechanics of wheels, brakes, and pedals remain consistent. The emotional experience of engaging in a pleasurable diversion contrasts sharply with the effort required for a challenging task, creating an illusion of differing underlying mechanics. Grasping this universal applicability is essential for anyone seeking behavioral transformation. During my behavior design bootcamps, which are intensive workshops designed to help professionals develop solutions for various industries, I often initiate the program with a personal exercise. I ask participants to share one positive routine they established effortlessly and one negative routine they desperately wish to eliminate. At one such event, an executive named Katie provided a perfect illustration of how drastically different 2 habits can feel while sharing the exact same anatomy. Katie, a highly capable leader managing numerous employees and a massive budget, possessed a remarkably productive positive habit. Every evening before departing her office, she meticulously organized her workspace. She shut down her computer, arranged her documents, and categorized the tasks on her whiteboard. This simple routine provided her with a surge of energy upon returning the following morning, setting a positive tone for the day. She had never consciously designed this habit. It simply emerged and solidified over time. Conversely, when asked about a negative habit, Katie enthusiastically confessed her struggle with mindlessly scrolling through social media while in bed. Her mobile phone served as her alarm clock, set for an ambitious 4:30 in the morning to accommodate her New Year's resolution to exercise daily. However, upon silencing the alarm, she would invariably succumb to the lure of notifications. One video would lead to another, and before she knew it, her workout window had vanished. This initiated a daily cycle of guilt and self-criticism. She erroneously believed her willpower had simply run dry. Analyzing Katie's two routines reveals the stark contrast in her emotional experience. The tidying habit felt empowering and automatic, seamlessly supporting her professional aspirations. The scrolling habit, while momentarily gratifying, ultimately fostered deep disappointment and derailed her fitness goals. Despite these contrasting feelings, both actions are driven by the exact same three elements. Katie had not exhausted her willpower. She simply possessed a poorly designed scrolling habit that directly interfered with an equally poorly designed exercise habit. Whenever a behavior occurs, motivation, ability, and a prompt have aligned. The specific levels of each variable will fluctuate based on the individual and the context, but the underlying equation remains absolute. To visualize this, imagine a graph where the vertical axis represents motivation, ranging from low to high, and the horizontal axis represents ability, ranging from hard to do on the left to easy to do on the right. Sweeping across this graph is a curved line known as the action line. The action line is the most critical element of this visual model. When a behavior is prompted above this curved line, the action occurs. If you possess immense motivation but entirely lack the physical ability, such as wishing to lift a massive weight far beyond your strength, you fall below the action line and experience frustration when prompted. Conversely, if a task is incredibly easy but you possess absolutely zero motivation, a prompt will only serve as a nuisance, and the behavior will not happen. Behaviors that successfully transition into automatic habits consistently reside above this action line. When we plot Katie's office tidying on this graph, we see moderate motivation combined with a task that is very easy to do, placing it comfortably above the line. However, her morning scrolling habit is characterized by extremely high motivation, fueled by the psychological design of social media, and incredibly high ability, as the phone is already in her hand. Coupled with the reliable prompt of her morning alarm, this negative habit sits exceptionally high above the action line, explaining its tenacious grip on her mornings. To alter her reality, we must systematically adjust these components. This brings us to a fundamental rule. Motivation and ability have a compensatory relationship. Mastering this dynamic is the gateway to designing any desired change. This relationship can be broken down into 4 guiding principles. First, the higher your motivation, the more likely you are to execute the behavior. When motivation surges, individuals can accomplish extraordinarily difficult feats. The classic example of a parent summoning superhuman strength to protect a child perfectly illustrates this. High stakes trigger adrenaline, pushing the individual far above the action line. However, when motivation is only moderate, the behavior will only occur if it is relatively easy to complete. Second, the more difficult a behavior is to perform, the less likely it is to happen. If someone requested that you merely show them the cover of the book you are currently reading, you would likely comply. It is a minor interruption and physically effortless. However, if that same person demanded you read the entire book aloud to them, your response would drastically change. To undertake such a demanding task, you would require a massive injection of motivation, perhaps a significant financial reward, or a deep personal obligation. Difficult tasks demand extraordinary motivation. This leads to a life-altering insight. The easier a behavior is to do, the more likely it is to become a lasting habit. This rule is blind to morality. It applies equally to habits we deem beneficial and those we consider detrimental. Third, motivation and ability operate as a team. For an action to land above the action line, both must be present, but they can compensate for one another. If your motivation is waning, your ability to perform the task must be exceptionally high. Conversely, if a task is arduous, your motivation must be soaring. Returning to Katie's office routine, the task requires less than 3 minutes, making it incredibly easy. Even on days when her motivation to tidy dips significantly, the sheer ease of the task compensates, keeping her above the action line. Crucially, the more frequently you perform an action, the easier it becomes, naturally shifting your ability to the right on the graph. Had Katie attempted to deep clean her entire office daily, the habit would never have formed. The difficulty would have caused her to fail whenever she felt rushed. Fourth, no behavior occurs without a prompt. If the prompt is absent, your levels of motivation and ability are entirely irrelevant. You are either cued to act or you are not. While motivation and ability are constant, underlying forces, a prompt is a momentary spark. If your telephone does not ring, you will not answer it, regardless of your desire or proximity to the device. Therefore, the most straightforward method for eliminating an unwanted action is to remove the prompt entirely. I experienced this firsthand during a conference in Austin, Texas. Upon entering my hotel room, I discovered a complimentary basket overflowing with salty snacks. As someone who attempts to maintain a healthy diet but harbors a weakness for chips and peanuts, I immediately recognized the danger. That basket would serve as a glaring, unavoidable prompt at the end of every exhausting day. Attempting to suppress my inherent motivation for salty food was a losing battle. Making the behavior significantly harder was impractical. The only viable solution was to eliminate the cue. I relocated the entire basket to the lowest shelf of a closed cabinet. By silencing the visual prompt, I successfully navigated the rest of the conference without once indulging in the hidden treats. Using the behavior model to disrupt a habit requires a strategic approach rather than relying on sheer willpower. Let us apply this to Katie's morning social media compulsion. Her motivation to connect with friends and experience the psychological rewards of the platform is inherently high and virtually impossible to diminish. Therefore, the solution lies in adjusting her ability and her prompt. She could attempt to drastically reduce her ability by permanently deleting her account, but such an extreme measure is often unsustainable. Instead, she explored methods to make the specific morning behavior more difficult. She considered deleting the application from her device, placing the phone across the room, or even leaving it in her vehicle overnight. Because the pull of social media was so strong, she required a robust, dual-layered solution. Ultimately, she decided to charge her phone in the kitchen and purchased a traditional, standalone alarm clock for her bedroom. By introducing physical distance, she drastically reduced her ability to scroll in bed. Furthermore, by relying on an old-fashioned clock, she entirely removed the smartphone from her morning waking sequence, successfully eliminating the prompt. Once she dismantled the negative cycle, her existing motivation and plans for daily exercise naturally took precedence. By meticulously tinkering with the components of the model, practically any undesirable pattern can be short-circuited. The true power of this framework is that it provides one model to understand all behavior, allowing you to decode not just your own actions, but the actions of those around you. This objective perspective fosters empathy and provides actionable solutions in frustrating interpersonal situations. During a commercial flight, I found myself seated in front of a highly energetic child who began repeatedly kicking the back of my seat. Assessing the situation through the lens of behavior design, I realized I possessed no control over the internal prompt driving his restlessness, nor could I physically alter his ability to kick the seat. My only avenue of influence was motivation. Seeking a playful and calm approach, I leveraged the psychological principle of reciprocity. I retrieved a small, cheerful novelty button from my bag and gifted it to the child, gently suggesting it could serve as a reminder to keep his feet still. The unexpected gift shifted his motivation, the kicking ceased, and a potentially miserable flight was transformed into a pleasant experience for everyone involved. This model is equally transformative within the domestic sphere. My partner and I historically experienced friction regarding the maintenance of our shower. He is highly attentive to preventing mildew, while my standards are somewhat more relaxed. For years, he requested that I wipe down the shower after use, a task I consistently neglected. Eventually, he approached the issue systematically. He recognized that we shared a foundational motivation, a mutual desire for a clean environment and a harmonious relationship. He then inquired about the ability factor, asking what specifically made the task difficult for me. I admitted that his vague request left me paralyzed by ambiguity. I was unsure which tools to use or the exact scope of the cleaning required. This revelation highlighted that the abstract nature of the request made the ability incredibly low. His solution was brilliantly simple. He provided a 10-second physical demonstration. He showed me exactly which towel to grab, how to swiftly navigate it across the floor, and where to deposit it afterward. By eliminating the ambiguity, he instantly shifted my ability from difficult to effortless. The action rocketed above the action line, and I have faithfully completed the routine ever since. When attempts to foster a new action fail, there are 3 steps for troubleshooting a behavior. Most individuals immediately resort to manipulating motivation through incentives, punishments, or emotional pressure. This is a fundamental error. The proper sequence is strictly ordered. Step 1. Always verify the existence and effectiveness of the prompt. Step 2. Evaluate the individual's ability to perform the task. Step 3. And only if the first two are firmly established, address the motivation. Imagine a scenario where your team members continuously arrive late to a crucial weekly meeting. The instinctive managerial response is often rooted in motivation, issuing warnings, expressing visible frustration, or implementing penalties. However, a structured troubleshooting approach yields superior results. Begin by questioning the prompt. Do the employees have a reliable calendar reminder alerting them to the meeting's commencement? If not, establishing a standardized alert may entirely resolve the issue without unnecessary conflict. If the prompt is functional, proceed to ability. Inquire what systemic obstacles are hindering their punctuality. You may discover that a preceding departmental meeting consistently overruns, making physical transition impossible. The solution is logistical, not motivational. Only if both prompt and ability are unhindered should you explore motivational strategies. This logical sequence drastically reduces interpersonal friction. Consider asking a teenager to purchase supplies on their way home from school. When they arrive empty-handed, the common reaction is an emotional lecture regarding responsibility, a purely motivational tactic. A behavior design approach bypasses the anger. You simply ask if they had a reminder. When they admit to forgetting, you collaboratively design a prompt for the following day, such as a digital alarm. The supplies arrive successfully, and the relationship remains unscarred. Applying this same sequential logic to your own perceived failures, such as a lapsed meditation practice, replaces toxic self-blame with practical, solvable design flaws. I encourage you to constantly see the world through the behavior model lens. This objective perspective transforms daily frustrations into fascinating behavioral puzzles. We all engage in actions we later regret, from consuming unhealthy food to losing our temper. Understanding the mechanics behind these actions eradicates the need for self-condemnation. A graphic designer named Jennifer experienced this profound shift. Formerly an avid athlete, the demands of motherhood had reduced her physical activity to household chores. She deeply desired to resume exercising but found herself continually creating excuses to avoid her planned home yoga sessions or neighborhood jogs. The resulting guilt was immense, leading her to question her own willpower and character, often soothing her frustration with alcohol. When Jennifer analyzed her situation using the behavior framework, she isolated the exact point of failure. Her ability to do home yoga was high, but her motivation for solitary exercise was practically non-existent. She thrived on the energy of group dynamics. By abandoning the solitary routine and matching herself with a community spin class and a local running group, she realigned her actions with her genuine motivational drivers. More importantly, she escaped the suffocating narrative of personal inadequacy. She learned to view her routines as experimental recipes. If a habit failed to materialize, it was simply a matter of adjusting the ingredients, not an indictment of her soul. This shift in perspective requires abandoning the myth of sheer willpower and the rigid prescriptions of traditional self-improvement. Your life becomes a personal laboratory for experimentation, safe from judgment. However, as we prepare to design our new routines, we must remain vigilant against a specific psychological trap. We must beware of the motivation monkey, a deceptive force that tricks us into setting wildly unrealistic goals, propelling us to initial heights only to abandon us when endurance is required. To solidify these concepts, there are tiny exercises to practice the Fogg behavior model. The first exercise focuses on dismantling negative patterns. Identify 3 specific actions you wish to eliminate from your life. For each, brainstorm practical methods to entirely remove or avoid the triggering prompt. Next, devise strategies to significantly increase the physical or mental difficulty of the action, effectively lowering your ability. Finally, contemplate ways to reduce your underlying motivation. After analyzing all 3 avenues, select the single most effective intervention for each negative action and attempt to implement it. The second exercise leverages the power of teaching. The most effective method for internalizing new knowledge is to explain it to another person. Utilizing the core principles of the behavior equation, guide a willing participant through the interactions of motivation, ability, and prompts. Illustrate the concept using the visual graph, demonstrating how the action line dictates success or failure. Conclude the brief explanation by asking the individual what aspect of the model surprised them the most. This simple inquiry often sparks profound conversations, permanently anchoring the mechanics of behavior design in your own mind. Chapter 3. Motivation. Focus on matching. The cultural narrative surrounding success places a disproportionate and dangerous emphasis on motivation. It is celebrated as the ultimate engine of achievement, the magical ingredient that separates those who succeed from those who fail. We are constantly told that if we just want something badly enough, if we can just summon enough inner fire, we will inevitably reach our goals. This perspective is not merely flawed, it is actively harmful. When tackling any complex system, whether one is directing a massive corporate enterprise or acting as the boss overseeing the daily operations, cost controls, and seasonal holiday preparations of a busy sweet shop, it becomes immediately apparent that relying solely on temporary enthusiasm is a failing strategy. True behavior change requires us to acknowledge that motivation is inherently unreliable. To successfully navigate the mechanics of change, we must first understand why motivation so frequently abandons us when we need it most. The first reality we must confront is that motivation is complex. It is not a single, unified force, but rather a chaotic psychological jumble of conflicting desires, biological drives, and social pressures. At any given moment, your desire to eat a nutritious meal is actively at war with your evolutionary craving for sugar and fats. Your aspiration to wake up early and exercise is engaged in a brutal conflict with your physiological need for rest. Motivation is a constant negotiation between competing internal factions, making it a highly unstable foundation upon which to build a lasting habit. This instability is further amplified by a phenomenon known as the motivation wave. Think of a massive ocean swell. It rises rapidly, peaking with tremendous force before inevitably crashing and receding. Human motivation operates in the exact same manner. We experience intense surges of desire to change our lives, perhaps triggered by an inspiring documentary, a concerning medical diagnosis, or the arbitrary turning of a new year. During this peak, we feel capable of monumental effort. We buy expensive gym memberships, throw out all the junk food in the pantry, and commit to grueling new schedules. But the wave always crashes. The intense emotional energy dissipates, leaving us stranded with difficult tasks and depleted reserves. When the wave recedes, the expensive gym shoes sit unused by the door, and the punishing new routine is abandoned. Even outside of these dramatic surges, we are subject to constant motivation fluctuation. Our underlying drive to act shifts continuously throughout a single day. You may wake up feeling profoundly motivated to tackle a demanding project, only to find that by mid-afternoon, after a stressful commute and a difficult meeting, your motivation has entirely evaporated. Relying on an element that fluctuates so wildly hour by hour is a recipe for behavioral failure. You cannot build a stable house on a shifting foundation. A further complication arises because motivating toward an abstraction doesn't yield results. Human beings frequently confuse broad aspirations with actionable behaviors. We declare our intentions to reduce stress, improve productivity, or get healthy. These are beautiful outcomes, but they are entirely abstract. You cannot perform better health at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday. The brain requires concrete, specific actions to execute. When we rely on motivation to drive us toward a vague abstraction, we become paralyzed by ambiguity, unsure of what exact steps to take when the moment of truth arrives. Ultimately, we must accept the harsh truth that motivation is not the winning ticket for long-term change. It is a fair-weather friend. It will reliably show up when you are rested, excited, and facing easy tasks. But the moment you are exhausted, stressed, or confronted with a difficult challenge, motivation will vanish. To achieve sustained success, we must shift our strategy entirely. Instead of treating motivation as a permanent energy source, we must focus on outsmarting motivation. This involves a profound tactical shift. We must learn to harness the temporary surges of the motivation wave to execute one-time difficult behaviors that permanently alter our environment or reduce the friction for future actions. For example, when you are riding a high wave of motivation to eat healthier, you do not use that energy to try and force yourself to eat broccoli every day for a year. You use that surge to accomplish a difficult task, completely cleaning out your pantry and redesigning your kitchen environment. You outsmart the inevitable drop in motivation by ensuring that when your desire wanes, the healthy choice is already the easiest option available. This strategic approach begins with a structured process. Step 1. Get clear on your aspirations. You must identify exactly what ultimate outcome you desire. Write it down clearly. Acknowledge that this is the destination, not the vehicle. Whether it is improving your sleep architecture or expanding a business enterprise, the aspiration must be firmly established as the guiding star. Once the destination is set, you transition to step 2, explore behavior options. This is a phase of radical brainstorming. You must generate a massive, unfiltered list of specific, concrete actions that could potentially lead you to your aspiration. Imagine you possess a magic wand that can instantly implement any habit. What would you do? Would you meditate for an hour? Would you track every expense? You must swarm the problem, listing dozens of potential behaviors without judging their immediate practicality. The critical juncture arrives when selecting from this vast list. Most individuals fall into the trap of intuitive guessing. They select a behavior because it seems popular, because a celebrity endorsed it, or simply because it sounds sufficiently difficult to be effective. This guesswork leads to adopting habits that clash violently with one's actual lifestyle and biological rhythms. The sustainable alternative is skillful matching. The right way, match yourself with specific behaviors. You must identify what we call golden behaviors. A golden behavior meets 3 strict criteria. It is highly effective at moving you toward your aspiration, it is something you actually want to do, and it is something you have the practical capacity to do consistently. You are searching for the perfect intersection of impact, desire, and ability. To systematically identify these ideal actions, we utilize a tool called focus mapping. This is a rigorous filtering process designed to eliminate the noise and highlight the signal. During round 1 of focus mapping, you take your extensive list of brainstormed behaviors and evaluate them strictly based on their potential impact. You sort the behaviors, moving the most highly effective actions to the top and the less impactful ones to the bottom. At this stage, you are entirely ignoring how difficult or unpleasant the actions might be. You are solely analyzing their objective power to generate results. Once the high-impact behaviors are identified, you proceed to round 2. Here, you evaluate those top-tier behaviors based on their feasibility in your actual life. You must be brutally honest. You move the behaviors you genuinely want to do and can easily perform to the right side of the map, and the difficult, unpleasant tasks to the left. By systematically applying this 2-step filter, finding your golden behaviors easily becomes a natural outcome. The behaviors that end up in the top right corner of your map, representing both high impact and high feasibility, are your golden ticket. These are the habits you are naturally wired to succeed at. You do not have to force them or rely on a mythical reserve of willpower. They are already aligned with your desires and your reality. To master this process, it is essential to engage in tiny exercises to practice behavior design. Try taking a current frustration in your life and rapidly generating a swarm of at least 20 potential behavioral solutions. Then, practice the art of focus mapping, ruthlessly filtering that list for impact and feasibility. The more you practice matching yourself to the right behaviors, the more you will realize that personal transformation is not a test of character, but simply a matter of skillful design. Chapter 4. Ability Easy Does It. The modern instinct when confronted with a challenging goal is to push harder. We have been culturally conditioned to associate difficulty with nobility. The prevailing narrative suggests that if a workout does not leave you utterly exhausted, it was not a genuine effort. If a new dietary regimen is not painfully restrictive, it cannot possibly yield results. We romanticize the struggle, believing that true transformation requires a grueling trial by fire. However, when the objective is to design permanent, sustainable behavior change, this mindset is fundamentally destructive. Friction is the enemy of habit. The secret to enduring action does not lie in artificially elevating your effort or forcing yourself through a wall of resistance. The secret is to fundamentally redesign the task until it is effortlessly simple. If you want a behavior to happen with unwavering consistency, you must make it remarkably easy to execute. The easier an action is, the less it must rely on the unpredictable, shifting tides of motivation. We are free to dream vividly and envision massive, life-altering transformations, but the actual execution of those dreams must be microscopic. When we analyze our capacity to perform any given action, we are essentially examining a sequence of specific resources. This sequence is known as the ability chain. It is composed of 5 distinct interlocking links: time, money, physical effort, mental effort, and routine. To understand why a habit consistently fails to take root, you must objectively examine this chain and identify the weakest link. The chain is only as strong as that single point of failure. Consider a well-intentioned plan to prepare a complex, healthy meal every evening. If the recipe requires an hour of preparation, but your commute leaves you with only 20 minutes of free time before exhaustion sets in, time is the broken link. The habit will inevitably collapse. If a new fitness program requires an expensive monthly subscription or specialized equipment that strains your budget, money becomes the broken link. Physical effort is often the most glaring barrier. The human organism is evolutionarily wired to conserve energy. Any new behavior that demands significant, unaccustomed physical exertion will naturally be fiercely resisted by our biological programming. However, mental effort is an equally formidable, yet often invisible, adversary. We possess a strictly limited reserve of cognitive bandwidth each day. Forcing ourselves to decipher complex new rules, navigate confusing software, or weigh difficult decisions drains that reserve rapidly. A habit that requires deep focus at the end of a long workday will almost certainly be abandoned due to cognitive fatigue. Finally, the element of routine must be considered. If a new behavior violently disrupts the natural choreography of your established day, forcing you to swim against the current of your normal schedule, it will inevitably fail. Using ability to create habits requires us to act as architects, meticulously evaluating our desired behaviors against these 5 factors and systematically eliminating the friction. There are 3 primary avenues for achieving this simplicity. The first avenue is to actively elevate your own skills. Through repeated practice, your physical coordination and mental familiarity with a task will increase. As your skill grows, the behavior becomes objectively easier to perform, naturally shifting you towards success. The second avenue involves acquiring the proper tools. Sometimes an investment in the right equipment, whether it is a comfortable pair of running shoes that prevents blisters or a simple kitchen tool that halves preparation time, can instantly dissolve significant physical and mental barriers. However, the most powerful, immediate, and universally applicable method is the third avenue, scaling back the behavior itself. This involves ruthlessly shrinking the desired action until it requires virtually no time, money, physical exertion, or mental bandwidth. You achieve this extreme simplicity by utilizing 2 specific techniques. The first technique is establishing a starter step. A starter step is not a miniature version of the habit. It is the absolute first physical movement required to initiate the larger behavior. It is the crucial ignition spark. If your grand aspiration is to walk 3 miles every morning, the starter step is not walking to the end of the driveway. The starter step is merely putting on your walking shoes. By focusing the entirety of your attention on mastering this single tiny prelude, you effectively bypass the psychological dread associated with the larger exertion. You trick the brain. Once the shoes are tied, the momentum of the action often naturally carries you out the door. The goal is to make the initiation so effortless that resistance seems absurd. The second technique is shrinking the behavior in scale. Instead of focusing on the runway, you reduce the volume of the entire flight. If you desire a robust meditation practice, you do not force yourself to sit still for 30 agonizing minutes. You commit to taking exactly 3 deep, intentional breaths. If you want to read more, you commit to reading a single paragraph before bed. You strip away the overwhelming volume of the task until only a minuscule, highly manageable core remains. Understanding these concepts intellectually is insufficient. They must be integrated through practice. There are tiny exercises for making a habit easier to do that solidify this mindset. When you find yourself continually failing to execute a planned behavior, do not default to self-criticism. Instead, pause and audit the ability chain. Ask yourself precisely which of the 5 links is snapping. Is the task demanding too much of your time? Is it mentally draining? Once the friction point is isolated, aggressively redesign the approach. Practice the art of the starter step in your daily life. Choose an ambitious, daunting task and distill it down to its most microscopic initial action. Commit exclusively to that first movement, allowing momentum to dictate what follows. Similarly, practice shrinking your larger aspirations into actions so profoundly small that failure becomes virtually impossible. By relentlessly focusing on simplicity and dismantling the barriers of difficulty, you strip away the anxiety associated with personal change. You replace the exhausting reliance on willpower with a quiet, undeniable, and effortless consistency. Chapter 5. Prompts. The power of after. Every action in your life, from the profound to the mundane, is initiated by a specific trigger. This spark is the prompt. In the framework of human behavior, motivation and ability are the underlying, continuous forces, but the prompt is the decisive moment of ignition. Without it, absolutely nothing happens. You could possess the unwavering motivation of a champion and the ability to perform a task effortlessly, but if you are never prompted to act, the behavior will remain dormant forever. Recognizing the power of prompts is perhaps the most transformative realization in the science of habit formation, because it shifts the burden of change away from your memory and onto the natural rhythms of your environment. There are essentially 3 types of prompts that dictate our days. The first type is the person prompt. This relies entirely on an internal cue. It is the bodily sensation of a growling stomach that prompts you to seek food, or the sudden, unprompted realization that you forgot to call your mother on her birthday. While biological person prompts are highly effective for basic survival, relying on mental person prompts, essentially trusting your memory, is a disastrous strategy for building new habits. Your memory is inherently fallible, easily overwritten by stress, distraction, and the sheer volume of daily responsibilities. Depending on yourself to simply remember to perform a new action is a guaranteed path to failure and subsequent self-blame. The second type is the context prompt. These are external cues designed into your environment. Sticky notes on the bathroom mirror, calendar alerts on your phone, and the ringing of a doorbell all serve as context prompts. They are significantly more reliable than relying solely on memory, and they are incredibly useful for one-time behaviors or temporary reminders. However, they possess a fatal flaw when used for long-term habit formation. They frequently become invisible. A sticky note left on a monitor for a week blends into the background scenery. An alarm that sounds at the same time every day eventually becomes a nuisance that you reflexively silence without performing the associated action. Context prompts can be managed, but they require constant maintenance and refreshing to remain effective. The third type, and the absolute gold standard for creating lasting change, is the action prompt. An action prompt utilizes a behavior you already perform reliably and links a new desired behavior to it. It leverages the existing momentum of your life. Your day is not a blank canvas. It is a dense, interlocking matrix of established routines. You wake up, you turn off the alarm, you place your feet on the floor, you walk to the bathroom, you turn on the faucet. Each of these deeply ingrained actions can serve as an unbreakable trigger for a new tiny habit. When you use an existing action to cue a new behavior, you are utilizing the power of the anchor moment. The anchor moment is the solid, immovable rock in the rushing river of your daily routine. By tethering a new, microscopic behavior to this rock, you ensure it will not be swept away by distraction. This is the core formula of the tiny habits method. After I perform my anchor moment, I will execute my new tiny behavior. The power of this design lies in the word after. It removes the necessity of making a decision. You do not have to negotiate with yourself about when to perform the new habit. The environment makes the decision for you. Selecting the correct anchor is a matter of strategic design. A common mistake is choosing an anchor that is too vague. Telling yourself you will perform a new habit after breakfast is insufficiently precise. Breakfast is a prolonged event with many moving parts. Does after breakfast mean after taking the last bite, after placing the dish in the sink, or after wiping the table? Ambiguity destroys habits. The anchor must be a highly specific physical action with a definitive trailing edge. The trailing edge is the precise microsecond an action concludes. The moment you place the coffee mug down on the counter, the moment your head touches the pillow, the moment you hear the click of the car door closing, these are definitive trailing edges that provide a sharp, unmistakable cue for the next action. To seamlessly weave a new behavior into your life, the anchor and the new action must be carefully matched. The first consideration is physical location. If you desire to cultivate a habit of doing 2 push-ups, selecting an anchor like "after I turn off the shower" is fundamentally flawed. You are wet, in a confined space, and physically unprepared for the new action. The physical context of the anchor must effortlessly support the execution of the new habit. A far superior anchor would be "after I place my gym bag by the front door." The physical environment is aligned with the required effort. The second consideration is frequency. The rhythm of the anchor must perfectly match the desired rhythm of the new habit. If you want to develop a habit of deep breathing that occurs multiple times throughout the day, anchoring it to your morning toothbrushing routine is a mismatch. The anchor only occurs twice, but you desire the behavior more frequently. Tying the breathing exercise to a higher frequency anchor, such as "after I open my laptop," ensures the new habit is prompted at the appropriate intervals. Conversely, anchoring a once-a-day habit to a frequent action, like checking your phone, will quickly become exhausting and lead to burnout. The third and perhaps most elegant consideration is thematic alignment. The most resilient habits are those where the new behavior naturally shares a thematic connection with the anchor. If your aspiration is to cultivate more gratitude, anchoring a moment of reflection to the act of watering your houseplants makes intuitive sense. Both actions revolve around themes of nurturing growth and appreciation for life. If you wish to improve your dental hygiene, the classic example of flossing one tooth immediately after setting down your toothbrush is thematically perfect. When the purpose of the new habit echoes the purpose of the anchor, the transition feels entirely natural, almost inevitable. The brain readily accepts the pairing because it makes logical sense within the existing narrative of your day. Tiny exercises to find prompts for your new habits. Mastering the art of the action prompt requires active observation of your own life. To cultivate this skill, begin by auditing your morning routine. Most individuals possess a highly rigid, predictable sequence of actions during the first hour of waking. Mentally walk through your morning and identify 5 distinct, reliable anchor moments. Look for precise physical actions with clear trailing edges, such as starting the coffee maker, turning off the shower, or locking the front door. Once you have identified these anchors, practice brainstorming matching behaviors. Select a tiny, healthy habit you wish to adopt and test it against each of the 5 anchors, evaluating for physical compatibility, frequency, and thematic alignment. Another highly effective exercise is to analyze the existing prompts in your life that drive unwanted behaviors. Identify a negative habit and trace it backward. What is the precise moment of ignition? Is it a context prompt, like the vibration of a phone notification? Or is it an action prompt, such as sitting heavily on the couch after work, which invariably leads to turning on the television? By decoding the prompts that govern your current reality, you demystify your own behavior. You transition from a passive participant, acting on autopilot, to an active architect, capable of redesigning the triggers that shape your days. Chapter 6. Emotions create habits. For generations, a pervasive myth has dominated the landscape of self-improvement. The belief that habits are forged through sheer repetition. We are frequently told that if we force ourselves to perform an action for 21 days, or perhaps 66 days, the sheer mechanical repetition will eventually wire the behavior into our brains. This mathematical approach to human psychology is fundamentally incorrect and deeply damaging. Repetition does not create habits. Emotions create habits. When you experience a positive emotion in connection with a specific action, your brain releases a chemical called dopamine. This neurotransmitter is essentially the brain's save button. It signals to your neurology that whatever action you just performed is beneficial, rewarding, and worth remembering for the future. The dopamine rush is what actually encodes the neural pathways, transforming a deliberate, conscious effort into an automatic reflex. Without this emotional encoding, you are simply relying on willpower and brute force, struggling against the natural current of your own mind. Within the framework of behavior design, the specific positive emotion that wires in a new habit is referred to as shine. Shine is the authentic feeling of personal success. It is the quiet internal warmth of pride you feel when you ace a difficult exam, successfully comfort a crying child, or execute a perfect parallel park. It is a feeling of competence and triumph. Most people wait for massive, life-altering events to experience shine. However, to construct a life of positive habits, you must learn to generate this emotion on demand, intentionally attaching it to the microscopic actions you perform every day. The deliberate generation of this feeling is achieved through the practice of celebration. In the context of habit formation, celebration is not a grand party or an expensive reward. It is a microscopic, immediate action designed to spark the feeling of shine. The moment you execute your new tiny behavior, the instant you complete your 2 push-ups, or the second you place a single piece of dental floss between your teeth, you must deliberately celebrate. There are 2 absolute rules for effective celebration: timing and authenticity. First, the timing must be instantaneous. You cannot wait until the end of the day to pat yourself on the back for a morning habit. The dopamine release must perfectly coincide with the physical completion of the behavior. If the celebration is delayed by even a few minutes, the brain fails to connect the reward chemical to the specific action. Second, the celebration must be authentic. It must actually make you feel good. A celebration that feels hollow or sarcastic will not trigger the necessary neurological response. For many adults, the act of celebrating a tiny, seemingly insignificant behavior feels profoundly awkward, if not entirely absurd. We have been conditioned by society to reserve celebration for major milestones, graduations, promotions, or winning a championship. Cheering for oneself after drinking a single glass of water directly contradicts this cultural programming. Our inner critic often intervenes, suggesting that we look foolish or that the action is too small to warrant any positive reinforcement. To overcome this resistance, we must reframe celebration not as a reward, but as a critical piece of psychological technology. It is a tool, a necessary mechanism for rewiring the brain. Refusing to celebrate a tiny habit because it feels silly is akin to refusing to use fertilizer on a garden because the seeds are small. The celebration is the exact nutrient required for the habit to take root and grow. The specific method of celebration will vary wildly from person to person. What sparks shine in one individual may feel entirely artificial to another. The process of discovering your personal celebration style requires experimentation and a willingness to embrace playfulness. Some individuals find success with physical movements, a triumphant fist pump, a subtle nod in the mirror, clapping their hands, or doing a brief victory dance. Others rely on verbal cues, quietly stating phrases like "awesome," "nailed it," or "good job." For those who find outward expressions too uncomfortable, internal celebrations can be equally effective. You might vividly imagine a crowd cheering for you, envision fireworks, or simply take a deep breath and consciously allow a feeling of warmth and competence to wash over you. The physical manifestation is irrelevant. The only metric of success is the internal sensation of shine. If the action makes you feel successful, it is working. When you master the skill of celebration, you fundamentally alter your relationship with change. You transition from an adversary to an ally of your own mind. The journey of self-improvement is no longer a grueling march defined by self-denial and strict discipline. Instead, it becomes a continuous sequence of small, joyful victories. This emotional shift is the true power of this methodology. By learning to feel good about your smallest actions, you rapidly construct the architecture for a transformed life. Chapter 7. Growing your habits from tiny to transformative growth is a fundamental law of the natural world. When a seed is planted in fertile soil, provided with adequate sunlight, and nourished with water, expansion is an inevitable biological outcome. You do not have to stand over a sapling and forcefully stretch its branches to make it grow. In fact, doing so would only uproot the fragile system and destroy its potential. Human behavior operates under the exact same natural principles. Yet, when attempting to cultivate positive change, the default instinct is almost always to apply forceful, unnatural pressure. We attempt to drag ourselves toward massive transformations through sheer willpower and rigid discipline. This aggressive approach completely ignores the natural dynamics of growth. When you design a behavior correctly, when you shrink an action to a microscopic size, anchor it to a reliable existing routine, and immediately nourish it with the authentic emotion of success, you create the perfect psychological environment for organic expansion. Once this foundation is established, the habit will naturally initiate its own growth trajectory without requiring additional exertion. This transformation manifests through 2 distinct yet interconnected patterns: expansion and multiplication. The first pattern is the expansion of the habit itself. Consider the foundational example of flossing a single tooth. When this tiny action is performed consistently, the psychological resistance associated with the task entirely dissolves. The physical mechanics become fluid, and the mental effort drops to zero. Because the action is consistently rewarded with a feeling of success, the brain naturally desires more of that positive emotion. Consequently, the individual spontaneously begins to floss 2 teeth, then 5, until the entire mouth is clean. The tiny habit expands into a comprehensive routine. This expansion is completely effortless because the baseline ability has naturally increased through repetition. The individual is not forcing themselves to do more. They are simply allowing the behavior to naturally scale up as their capacity grows. The second pattern of growth is multiplication. This is a profound phenomenon where the establishment of one successful tiny habit acts as a catalyst for entirely new, often unrelated, positive behaviors. The individual who successfully wires in a morning habit of drinking a glass of water suddenly finds themselves naturally inclined to organize their workspace, or they spontaneously decide to take the stairs instead of the elevator. The initial habit creates a powerful ripple effect across their entire life. This multiplication occurs because of a profound internal identity shift. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are dictate our actions. For years, an individual might have carried the heavy, limiting identity of someone who is lazy, unfocused, or incapable of sticking to a routine. However, when they begin to execute tiny habits consistently, they accumulate undeniable daily evidence of their own success. Every time they complete a microscopic action and feel that deliberate surge of pride, they are quietly rewriting their internal narrative. They begin to view themselves through a different lens. They become the type of person who follows through, the type of person who prioritizes their well-being, the type of person who succeeds. This new identity acts as a powerful gravitational force, naturally pulling other positive behaviors into its orbit to align with this newly discovered self-image. Sustaining this transformative growth requires a fundamental shift in perspective regarding change itself. Personal transformation is not a mystical gift bestowed upon a lucky few. It is a highly structured, masterable set of skills. Just as one learns the distinct techniques of playing an instrument or speaking a new language, one must deliberately practice and master the skills of change. The first crucial skill set is behavior crafting. This involves the ability to objectively analyze your own actions and environment, understanding precisely how to manipulate the dials of motivation, ability, and prompts. A master of behavior crafting knows how to identify the perfect, reliable anchor moment in a chaotic schedule. More importantly, they possess the wisdom to scale a habit back to its absolute smallest iteration on difficult days. When exhaustion sets in and the expanded routine feels impossible, they do not abandon the habit entirely. They seamlessly shift back to the starter step, preserving the neural pathway and maintaining consistency over intensity. The second skill set is cultivating deep self-insight. This goes far beyond superficial personality assessments. It is the rigorous, honest understanding of your own unique physiological and psychological rhythms. It requires recognizing which specific actions genuinely spark motivation within you, rather than adopting habits simply because they are popular. It means understanding your own thresholds for cognitive fatigue and identifying precisely what internal narratives or physical gestures authentically generate the necessary feeling of success. Self-insight allows you to design behavioral recipes that are perfectly tailored to your specific reality. The third skill set involves mastering the process of systematic experimentation. True transformation requires abandoning the toxic mindset of perfectionism. When a newly designed habit fails to take root, an unskilled individual will experience profound shame and attribute the failure to a lack of character. A master of the change process experiences zero emotional distress. They recognize that failure is merely neutral data indicating a flaw in the design. They approach the problem like a scientist in a laboratory. They tweak the recipe. They might move the prompt to a different time of day, simplify the physical action further, or alter the celebration technique. They iterate relentlessly until the behavior clicks into place. The fourth and final skill set is mastering context. This is the profound realization that your physical and social environment is the invisible hand continually shaping your behavior. We are largely products of our surroundings. A master of change does not rely on willpower to resist temptation. They intentionally engineer their environment to make failure difficult and success inevitable. They place visual cues for positive habits directly in their line of sight, while aggressively burying or eliminating the triggers for destructive routines. They understand that by first shaping their environment will effortlessly shape them. The practical application of these skills creates transformative results across every conceivable life situation. Consider the profound challenge of increasing daily productivity and overcoming the paralysis of procrastination. A master of behavior design does not attempt to force 3 hours of agonizing focus. Instead, they implement a tiny recipe. Immediately after sitting in their office chair, they open a single, necessary document and write 1 sentence. This microscopic action bypasses the overwhelming anxiety of a massive project. It serves as a gentle ignition spark, frequently multiplying into hours of deep, continuous work simply because the friction of starting was eliminated. Similarly, in the pursuit of managing chronic stress and improving family dynamics, the solution is rarely a grand, sweeping gesture. It is often found in a meticulously designed, tiny intervention. A recipe might dictate that the moment the individual turns off their car engine in the driveway after work, they pause and take 1 profound, intentional breath before opening the door. This single, microscopic pause serves as a vital transition point, interrupting the frantic momentum of the workday. This tiny moment of reset expands, altering the emotional frequency of the individual as they enter their home, ultimately transforming an evening of potential conflict into a space of presence and peace. The ultimate truth of personal transformation is that the magnitude of the result is fundamentally disconnected from the magnitude of the initial effort. By abandoning the exhausting pursuit of monumental leaps and embracing the quiet, precise science of tiny adjustments, you unleash the natural dynamics of growth, allowing small, strategic changes to inevitably change everything. Chapter 8. Untangling Bad Habits. A Systematic Solution. There is a profound and painful misconception that creating a positive habit and stopping a negative one are essentially the same process, simply operating in reverse. This flawed logic dictates that if you can force yourself into a good routine through sheer willpower, you should be equally capable of white-knuckling your way out of a destructive one. When people fail to stop overeating, endlessly scrolling on their devices, or losing their temper, they invariably blame a lack of discipline. They view their unwanted behaviors as personal moral failings. However, the architecture of stopping a behavior requires an entirely different approach than starting one. You cannot simply command a deeply ingrained negative routine to vanish. Attempting to do so is like trying to untangle a massive, complex knot of varying threads by simply grabbing 2 ends and pulling as hard as you can. The harder you pull with willpower, the tighter the knot becomes. To achieve freedom, you must abandon force and adopt the behavior change master plan. This master plan is a precise, analytical method for examining the tangled mass of your actions and systematically loosening the individual threads until the entire structure falls apart. The first crucial step in this untangling process often requires an internal shift in how you view yourself. When a negative habit persists for years, it ceases to be merely something you do. It subtly transforms into something you are. You begin to internalize the behavior, adopting labels that cement the habit into your sense of self. You tell yourself, and often others, that you are simply a chronically stressed person, a hopeless procrastinator, or someone with a relentless sweet tooth. This identity acts as a powerful anchor, silently validating the negative behavior every time it occurs. To truly dismantle the habit, you must initiate a deliberate identity shift. You must consciously separate your core self from the mechanical execution of the behavior. You are not your habit. The behavior is simply a poorly designed response to a specific set of environmental and psychological triggers. By shifting your internal narrative from "I am someone who cannot resist this" to "I am someone who currently possesses a habit I am working to redesign," you strip the behavior of its emotional power and reduce it to a solvable puzzle. Once the emotional weight is lifted, the tactical work begins. The most common mistake people make when attempting to eliminate a bad habit is trying to leave a complete vacuum in its place. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does human neurology. If you experience a stress-induced prompt to smoke a cigarette or consume unhealthy food, simply trying to do absolutely nothing in response requires an agonizing, unsustainable amount of mental energy. The prompt is still firing, demanding an action. Therefore, the most elegant and effective strategy is often remapping prompts to swap a habit. You do not attempt to silence the trigger, you skillfully redirect it. You identify the exact cue that initiates the negative behavior, and you intentionally attach a new, positive, or at least neutral, tiny behavior to that very same anchor. If the afternoon slump at your desk inevitably prompts you to visit the vending machine for a sugary snack, the prompt is the feeling of fatigue combined with the time of day. Instead of fighting the urge to stand up and move, you remap the response. You decide that when that specific fatigue sets in, it will serve as your prompt to stand up, walk to the water cooler, drink a full glass of water, and return to your desk. By actively practicing this new sequence and deliberately feeling successful upon its completion, the old neural pathway eventually weakens, and the new healthier response becomes the automatic default. You have successfully hijacked the existing trigger. However, a simple swap is not always sufficient for deeply ingrained routines. When the gravitational pull of the bad habit remains too strong, you must escalate your strategy by adjusting both ability and motivation to swap a habit. This involves a dual-layered intervention. First, you must aggressively increase the friction associated with the negative behavior, making it as difficult as possible to execute. Simultaneously, you must decrease the friction of the positive replacement behavior, making it almost effortless. If you are trying to swap a habit of evening television consumption with a habit of reading, simply placing a book on the coffee table is rarely enough to overcome the easy allure of the remote control. You must manipulate the environment. You might unplug the television and place the remote in a difficult-to-reach cabinet, drastically lowering your ability to turn it on. At the same time, you place the book directly on your favorite chair, ensuring the ability to read is instantly accessible. If this environmental manipulation is still insufficient, you must examine the motivation element. You might require an accountability partner to decrease your motivation to watch television, or you might select a thrilling, highly engaging book to artificially inflate your motivation to read. By pulling these levers simultaneously, you tilt the scales heavily in favor of the desired swap. Yet, there are times when a negative habit is so entrenched, so deeply woven into the fabric of your daily survival or emotional coping mechanisms, that these initial strategies falter. If nothing so far has worked, it is not a signal to surrender to despair, it is a mandate to go deeper into the mechanics of the BSMAP model. When dealing with formidable challenges, such as profound addictions or lifelong compulsions, you must systematically dismantle the behavior starting with the most critical element, the prompt. You must conduct a ruthless audit of your environment and eliminate the triggers entirely. If the prompt cannot be eliminated, you must construct massive, insurmountable barriers to your ability. You must remove the unhealthy food from the house, install software that physically prevents access to distracting websites, or fundamentally alter your daily commute to avoid passing the location where the negative habit is triggered. You must engineer your life so that executing the bad habit becomes a logistical nightmare. It is vital to remember throughout this journey that this process is a skill. Untangling bad habits is not an innate talent. It is a learned competency that requires patience, observation, and relentless experimentation. You will inevitably experience setbacks. The knot will occasionally tighten before it loosens. When a negative habit resurfaces, the untrained mind responds with toxic self-blame, viewing the relapse as proof of failure. The individual who has mastered the skill of behavior design views the relapse objectively, recognizing it simply as a design flaw that requires adjustment. They ask themselves what specific prompt slipped through their defenses, or how the ability to perform the bad habit became too easy. They tweak the system and try again, completely devoid of shame. Interestingly, the universe sometimes provides unexpected assistance in this untangling process. We frequently dread major life transitions, moving to a new city, starting a different job, or even undergoing a significant renovation. We view these events as chaotic and stressful. However, within the framework of habit change, we can appreciate the beauty of disruption. A massive shift in your environment effectively shatters your existing network of prompts. Suddenly, your morning routine is completely different, your commute has changed, and the physical cues that effortlessly triggered your bad habits are simply gone. The slate is wiped clean. This disruption, while momentarily disorienting, is the absolute optimal time to establish new, positive routines and allow the old, negative behaviors to quietly fade away from a lack of environmental stimulation. To internalize these concepts, you must engage in tiny exercises to practice stopping and swapping. Begin by selecting a minor, annoying habit that you wish to eliminate, such as biting your nails when reading emails or slouching when seated at a specific desk. First, practice the skill of pinpointing the exact prompt. Then, design a highly specific, simple swap. If the prompt is opening your inbox, design the swap to be taking one deep breath and placing your hands flat on the desk. Practice this new sequence deliberately. If it fails, systematically adjust the ability, make the negative behavior slightly harder and the positive behavior slightly easier. Through this continuous low-stakes practice, you develop the precise analytical mindset required to untangle the most stubborn knots in your life, replacing frustration with a quiet, powerful sense of control. Chapter 9. How we change together. Human beings are profoundly social creatures. We do not operate in a vacuum, and our behaviors are rarely isolated events. The routines that define our days are deeply intertwined with the routines of the people around us, our families, our friends, and our colleagues. When we attempt to change our lives entirely on our own, relying solely on internal redesign, we frequently encounter the immense gravitational pull of our existing social environments. It is incredibly difficult to sustain a new positive habit if the people you live and work with are unknowingly actively maintaining the friction or dismantling your prompts. However, this social interconnectedness is not merely a hurdle, it is a profound opportunity. When the principles of behavior design are applied not just to the individual but to a collective, the potential for transformation scales exponentially. Changing together is not merely about achieving a shared goal, it is about fundamentally redesigning the culture of the groups to which we belong. The traditional approach to group change, whether in a corporate setting attempting to increase productivity or a family trying to eat healthier, is almost universally reliant on motivation. Leaders and parents alike default to delivering impassioned speeches, offering financial incentives or, conversely, utilizing guilt and the threat of punishment. These methods operate on the flawed assumption that if you simply make a group care enough, their collective behavior will magically shift. As we have seen, motivation is a temporary and unreliable phenomenon. When a group relies on motivation, they may experience a brief surge of compliance, but it will inevitably be followed by a sharp decline, leading to collective burnout, resentment, and a return to the baseline. True, sustainable group transformation requires abandoning the megaphone of motivation and adopting the quiet, precise tools of the architect. Designing for group change. When you decide to orchestrate change within a group, you must consciously adopt one of two specific roles. You act either as the ringleader or the ninja. The ringleader is the explicit, visible champion of change. This role requires transparency and active collaboration. A ringleader gathers the team or the family, openly introduces the mechanics of behavior design, and guides the group through the process together. If a family wishes to establish a routine of expressing gratitude at the dinner table, the ringleader initiates the conversation. They do not dictate the habit. Instead, they facilitate the focus mapping process collectively. The family brainstorms together, identifying an action that everyone actually possesses the ability and the desire to perform. The ringleader ensures that the chosen behavior lands squarely in the upper right-hand corner of the group's collective map, high impact and high feasibility. Crucially, the ringleader leads the troubleshooting process when the group inevitably falters. If the new routine is missed, the ringleader does not express disappointment or assign blame. Instead, they objectively ask the group, was the prompt forgotten? Was the action too difficult? They guide the group in adjusting the environment or shrinking the behavior, continually reinforcing the principle that failure is merely a design flaw. The ninja, conversely, operates entirely in the shadows. This role is implicit and relies completely on environmental design rather than discussion. You become a ninja when the group is resistant to formal change initiatives or when attempting to explain the psychological mechanics would only generate friction. A ninja understands that they cannot directly alter another person's motivation, so they focus exclusively on manipulating ability and prompts behind the scenes. If a manager wishes to encourage their team to drink more water and consume less caffeine, a ringleader would hold a meeting and pass out new water bottles. A ninja simply ensures that the water cooler is constantly stocked with ice and fresh fruit, placing it physically closer to the desks than the coffee machine. The ninja removes the friction for the positive behavior and subtly increases the physical effort required for the negative one. In the domestic sphere, a parent acting as a ninja might quietly place a bowl of washed, ready-to-eat apples on the most prominent shelf of the refrigerator, while moving the sugary snacks to the highest, least accessible cabinet in the pantry. The family members simply reach for what is easiest, completely unaware that their environment has been deliberately engineered to shape their actions. Both the ringleader and the ninja are highly effective, and mastering the dynamic of group change requires knowing precisely when to deploy each strategy. The bigger picture. When you successfully weave tiny positive habits into the fabric of a group, the impact extends far beyond the specific behaviors themselves. You begin to alter the underlying emotional frequency of the collective. Workplaces and homes frequently become saturated with a culture of stress, urgency, and chronic self-blame. When a project is delayed or a chore is neglected, the default response is often criticism, which breeds defensiveness and further anxiety. This toxic cycle suffocates growth and destroys psychological safety. Introducing behavior design dismantles this cycle. When a group learns to focus on simplicity rather than superhuman effort, the collective anxiety drastically diminishes. More importantly, when a group learns the profound skill of celebration, when they learn to authentically acknowledge and validate the microscopic successes of one another, the entire culture shifts. Imagine a workplace where, instead of only recognizing massive quarterly victories, colleagues actively celebrate the tiny, mundane moments of process, the completion of a difficult email, the organized filing of a document, or the simple act of arriving to a meeting on time. This continuous, low-level infusion of positive emotion creates a culture of profound resilience. It builds an environment where people feel inherently successful, supported, and safe to experiment. When the individuals within a group feel successful, the group itself becomes an unstoppable entity. They are no longer fighting against their own flawed human nature. They are moving harmoniously with the current, supporting one another through the inevitable challenges of life. The ultimate promise of this methodology is not just individual optimization, it is the creation of healthier, more compassionate communities. Tiny exercises to enhance a group's skills of change. To master the dynamics of collective transformation, you must practice these distinct roles within your own social spheres. The first exercise is to practice the way of the ringleader. Identify a small, low-stakes behavior you wish to introduce to your household or your immediate team at work. Openly initiate a brief conversation, present the objective, and collaboratively brainstorm a microscopic starter step. Work together to identify a reliable anchor moment that everyone shares. Most importantly, agree as a group on how you will briefly and playfully celebrate when the action is completed. Observe how the transparency of the process fosters engagement and reduces resistance. The second exercise is to practice the silent art of the ninja. Select one specific individual in your life who you know is struggling with a particular routine or attempting to adopt a new positive habit. Do not speak to them about your intentions. Instead, quietly analyze their environment through the lens of the behavior model. Identify one physical barrier that is making their desired action difficult and secretly remove it, or identify a subtle context prompt you can place in their path to naturally trigger the behavior. Observe the outcome. By mastering both the explicit and implicit methods of group design, you cultivate the profound ability to elevate the people around you, effortlessly guiding your shared environments toward a reality of continuous organic growth. Chapter 10. Conclusion. The small changes that change everything. The journey toward profound personal transformation does not conclude with a massive, exhausting leap across a seemingly impassable canyon. It ends exactly where it begins, with a single, microscopic, entirely manageable step. For too long, the cultural narrative surrounding self-improvement has been dominated by a militant philosophy. We have been conditioned to believe that change requires going to war with ourselves, that we must violently conquer our inherent laziness, and that success is strictly a matter of enduring pain and demonstrating unrelenting willpower. This adversarial relationship with our own minds is not only exhausting, It is the primary reason so many well-intentioned resolutions ultimately collapse into guilt and frustration. The methodology of behavior design offers a radical departure from this cycle of shame. It proposes a reality where change is not a battle to be won, but a garden to be cultivated. By understanding the underlying mechanics of human action, the precise intersection of motivation, ability, and prompts, we fundamentally alter our approach to life. We stop judging our character and start evaluating our design. When a desired behavior fails to materialize, the immediate response is no longer self-condemnation. Instead, it becomes a moment of objective curiosity. We ask ourselves if the prompt was visible, if the ability was too strained, or if the motivation was temporarily depleted. This shift from toxic self-blame to analytical troubleshooting is, in itself, one of the most transformative changes an individual can experience. This quiet revolution relies on two foundational, unshakable maxims that govern all human behavior. The first maxim dictates that you must help yourself, and those around you, do what is already desired. The most profound resistance is encountered when we attempt to force an action that fundamentally clashes with our inherent preferences and biological rhythms. True mastery lies in matching our aspirations with behaviors we actually want to execute. The second maxim is even more critical. You must help yourself feel successful. The human brain is inextricably wired to repeat actions that generate positive emotion. By deliberately cultivating the authentic feeling of success, the internal glow of shine, immediately after completing a microscopic action, we hack our own neurology. We replace the exhausting reliance on discipline with the effortless magnetic pull of joy. When these principles are applied consistently, they forge an expansive toolkit capable of addressing virtually any life situation or challenge. The beauty of this system lies in its infinite adaptability. Consider the challenge of navigating a chaotic, high-stress professional environment. The solution is not to vow to suddenly become impervious to anxiety. Instead, the solution is a tiny behavioral recipe designed for immediate, in-the-moment grounding. A master of behavior design might establish a sequence where, immediately after closing their car door upon arriving at the workplace, they take one profound, intentional breath. This single action, anchored to a physical inevitability and rewarded with a deliberate feeling of calm, serves as a crucial emotional buffer before the day begins. Similarly, when the goal is to foster deeper interpersonal connections, the approach remains microscopic. Instead of scheduling elaborate, time-consuming social events that inevitably fall prey to busy schedules, the focus shifts to everyday transitions. A recipe might dictate that the moment an individual unlocks their front door at the end of the day, they will immediately seek out their partner or family member and offer a warm, undivided greeting before engaging in any other task. This tiny 15-second intervention, when repeated consistently, fundamentally alters the emotional temperature of the household. It communicates presence and priority far more effectively than occasional grand gestures. In the realm of physical health and productivity, the same logic prevails. Overcoming the paralysis of a daunting project begins with anchoring the action of opening a single document to the routine of taking the first sip of morning coffee. Cultivating an active lifestyle does not require an immediate marathon registration. It begins with the simple recipe of putting on walking shoes immediately after placing the breakfast dishes in the sink. These are not merely tricks. They are precise neurological interventions. They respect the limitations of cognitive bandwidth and the fragile nature of daily motivation. As these tiny habits take root, they inevitably initiate a powerful ripple effect. The original, microscopic action, whether it is flossing one tooth, drinking a glass of water, or pausing to express gratitude, ceases to be an isolated event. It becomes a catalyst. The daily accumulation of these small successes fundamentally rewrites the internal narrative. The individual transitions from seeing themselves as someone who chronically struggles to someone who consistently succeeds. This new identity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, naturally pulling a multitude of other positive, expansive behaviors into its orbit. The ultimate promise of this methodology extends far beyond the acquisition of new routines. It is about reclaiming agency over your own existence. We are continually shaped by our environments, our social circles, and the chaotic demands of the modern world. However, by mastering the precise, microscopic elements of behavior, we cease to be passive recipients of our circumstances. We become the active architects of our daily reality. We learn that we do not have to wait for a surge of heroic motivation to improve our lives. We can begin right now, precisely where we are, with whatever resources we have available. By embracing the tiny, we unlock the transformative. We discover that the path to the most monumental achievements is not paved with exhaustion and self-denial, but with simplicity, celebration, and the quiet, undeniable power of the small changes that change absolutely everything.